You are listening to OffPlanet Radio at offplanetradio.com.
Welcome to OffPlanet TV. I'm Randy Moggins. Welcome to the show this week. Part of my privilege in doing all of this is to be able to share conversations that are meaningful and to bring people on that have something to say. But we're in this place right now where most of what we discuss, certainly on this show, but even in the broader spectrum of the alternative media, as it's called, there's no longer time for research and facts and figures and excruciating detail. Most of what we have to communicate is intuitive. It is something that you either know in your gut or you don't know at all. The people who listen to the show have an option. They listen to it. They glean the information. They are down with it. They're not down with it. But something inside of them knows that there's a legitimate communication going on. And so part of the goal is to bring into play conversations that are interesting, the kind you might have late at night sitting on the beach or a patio somewhere, perhaps with a beverage or some other nice emollient, and just kind of, you know, letting it unfold, letting consciousness unpack itself. And I'm happy to present somebody tonight who I can call a friend. I can call, I think this is dangerous. She may be the female me, and that's scary in itself. So without a lot of further ado on this intro tonight, I want you to meet someone that I've been very privileged to get to know and share some incredible conversations with. Emily Moyer, welcome to OffPlanet TV.
Wow, it's really a complete honor to be here. I'm a big fan of everything you've done, and it's helped me to get to the place where I'm at right now. So I couldn't think of a way I'd rather spend an evening than having a conversation with you.
And that's what it's going to be. It's not about fans or TV shows or anything like that. We're the anti-media. That's it. We're the anti-media. We're not the alternative media. We're the anti-media. You know, the word anti actually means instead of. It doesn't mean against.
Right? Yeah.
There we go. Here
that
we are.
Good. Instead of the media.
This is the anti-media.
There we go.
So, you know, you and I have actually kind of danced around the periphery of each other's realities for a lot of years. And I guess in the last 6 months or so, we've kind of gotten to know each other on a whole different level in terms of sitting down and talking and discussing a lot of the things that are common to us, which is, well, frankly, a lot of the experiences that we share and the perspectives we share and how we got to this space. A good place to start here is probably just to let people know a little bit of what do you want people to know about you on the onset tonight? A little bit about your background, a little bit about yourself. Share with the class.
Okay, so let's just start where it's at. So on one level, I'm a very normal girl who grew up in Los Angeles, who was a gymnast and did well in school and has a family that loves me and I love them, and has had some seemingly typical struggles finding myself in life, has had my ups and downs, and pulling it together finally. On another level, there's always been this sort of parallel thing going on that I was aware of on one level the whole time, but really have only begun to understand since I started really trying to get in alignment with what I believe to be the right way for myself to live. Um, and so this parallel thing was that I, was born in Los Angeles at Cedars of Lebanon, which is now inhabited by the Church of Scientology. I'm not a Scientologist, and I'm not a religious person at all, and have never had anything to do with religion, so I thought. But the more I sort of inspect and research the things that have surrounded places that I've been and things I've been involved with, I feel that I've definitely been touched by it in some unusual ways. So I was born at the Church of Scientology, and then very early in my life, I was involved in Hollywood, which is strange because I have absolutely no interest or tolerance for that now, really. But I was, from the age of 2 till about 6, I went on auditions and that kind of thing. And I was in a few television movies, one of which was called Rainbow, which was about Judy Garland's life. And I played her as a child. And that sort of sets the stage for what I came to realize, whether it was direct or just through the alignment of things culturally and whatnot, was sort of my Wizard of Oz programming and how I kind of set off through life. I started gymnastics. I finished my, I started gymnastics about the same time I started the Hollywood thing, but I was really much more interested in gymnastics, and very quickly the Hollywood thing, kind of fizzled out, which was fine. And I spent most of my life from 2 till certainly to my late teens and early 20s, completely involved in gymnastics. I had a few years in there where I took some time off, and that was tumultuous. But for the most part, I was going to school and doing really well, competing in gymnastics at a fairly high level. I even competed a little bit in college, did some stunt doubling, and those things really kind of kept me on a road, you can call it the Yellow Brick Road, that was, kept things seeming normal and unfolding in the order that they normally would seem that they should unfold in. Now, gymnastics is an interesting thing. It's very regimented, and I love gymnastics, and I met amazing people involved in it, but there's no way to get around the fact that there is a level of psychological abuse that goes along with it. For some people, physical abuse. But I mean, the sport itself is somewhat abusive, but I never had one of those coaches that was really physically abusive, certainly psychologically abusive in some senses. And it's also does this unnatural thing of teaching you to override your fears, which then makes it what gives you tremendous abilities, but it also sometimes doesn't allow you to be in touch with when something is really wrong, because it overrides that sensation too. So that's something that has been with me since then. When gymnastics was done for me, that was sort of when I really didn't know what to do with myself. And, I coached gymnastics for a long time, and I've had different, I've worked in the restaurant industry, I've done all sorts of things, but I was, never been able to find my thing, which has been hard for me because, I'm intellectual, and I'm interested in a lot of things. And it's, been difficult also because there was high expectations of me having done so well as a kid, and, getting into all sorts of any school that I wanted to go to and getting straight A's most of the time, but not ever really being able to find my thing. And through those struggles, I began to do what we call waking up, which I think is kind of an annoying term, but it's also really accurate. Now, on one level, I've been awake my whole life, because for my whole life, I've been that person that was like, okay, what's going on? What's really going on here? Because there's what you think is going on, and then there's what's really going on, and they're not usually the same thing. And I've always sort of been aware of that. But I guess for me, when gymnastics went away and I dabbled in all sorts of, nonsense that young people dabble in, and I'd say in some ways I was going through like a decade and a half long dark night of the soul. So I started becoming aware of certain things and researching things and whatnot. And one of the things that happened was that I took a class that when I was a period of time when I was in college that was called the Sociology of Drug Use. And during that, I became, and this was really before I became super politically aware, but I became aware of this weird thing going on where, like, they were creating problems so that they could then solve them. We talked a lot about the drug war. I became really obsessed with the information about Gary Webb and the Dark Alliance. And it was amazing to have this being taught to me in college. That professor since no longer teaches that class and no longer works at that university. Surprise, surprise. But it was an eye-opening class for me on a lot of levels to understand that, like, they were making things happen so that they could do the things that they want. This was my first exposure to the idea of problem, reaction, solution kind of thing. So that happened at about the same time that my stepbrother died in a very unfortunate manner, and I just completely fell apart then. And at that same time, I started to find conspiratorial information and really look into it. Political stuff and whatnot. And, you know, that stuff was sort of interesting to me. I guess I used to like it was the idea of conspiracies was interesting. So fascinating on a certain level, but that isn't what really got me. What really got me was when I started to do research and found out a little bit. I had learned about it in the class, but more just from the LSD experiments. But when I discovered information concerning MK Ultra, it was like, I was kind of obsessed with looking into it. And when I saw Duncan O'Finian and listened to him, what was really strange for me was most people I talked to about it, when they heard that, they were like, wow, that is just crazy. And that wasn't really my response. My response was, oh yeah, I forgot about that, which was strange to me at the time, but I didn't really, it was just weird. I thought I knew him. I'm not saying that I do know him, but there was something very familiar about everything he was talking about. And I think that it got me to the spot where I was paralyzed with information. I was just looking into information about that and everything else. But I've been down every rabbit hole there is, and I was paralyzed, and I couldn't understand why I had all this information, but I couldn't integrate it. I couldn't synthesize it. I couldn't do something effective with it or just leave it and move on. And I spent a lot of years not doing anything, wasting my life pretty much, having interesting experiences sometimes, but also being very upset, engaging in a lot of destructive behavior. And I think I just got to a spot where it was like, okay, I have to find some way to pull myself together. And the first way that I sort of did that was nutritionally. And when I saw that opens up certain things for you, then I sort of really wanted to pull myself together, but was having trouble finding ways to do it. And a person who actually helped me a lot with that was Chris Taylor. Just clearing some things out. But what started happening for me was I kind of started to decide that, I had been suspecting and thinking for a long time that the MK Ultra thing was more personal to me than just my knowledge of it. But it's one of those things that's really difficult to discuss, especially when you're not living in alignment with what you believe, when you're not walking your talk. And because it sounds crazy. When you talk about some of this stuff, it sounds crazy. And I wanted to...
Let me stop you there for a minute.
Yeah.
Because you talked about the waking up experience. And a lot of people think that, we talk about the conspiracy theories and what's going on with the political realities and the whole system, the bankers, the cabal, the Illuminati. But really the waking up thing is finding out about you.
Yes.
Because your reactions to things become the mirror that you walk through.
Absolutely.
And this was one of our commonalities was a lot of people ask me, why all of a sudden out of the blue did you decide to do shows dealing with UFOs, extraterrestrials, conspiracy theory? And the answer is that the preface to that was this large ramp up where I acknowledged and then began to work through the aspects of my life that were hidden. And, for the average person, it's enough to deal with what they have on their plate, living in this globalist economic system right now with all the wars and the subterfuge that's going on in the human level, much less chemtrailing, the wars on nutrition, the wars on the body, the cancer wars, all of that. But when you bring into the mix the sub-psychological stratum of experiences that are not consistent with what you consider to be your perceived reality,
yeah,
now you've added a whole other layer to this. And the conversations that you and I have in a lot of ways tonight, you represent other people who for different reasons can't or won't come forward and talk about these things. But they're conversations that I've had over the course of the last 10 years with people that I've heard this in some deviation or another, the sense that something's wrong. And some people, when I've talked to them, were falling apart. And,
Yeah.
you know, I worked with people, some very long term, you know, a year or longer, just to get them through, not ever to deal with the issues, just the coping day to day. So your contribution on one level is you are speaking for other people who so far haven't. And what we're going to do is encourage people who are dealing with these situations to step out, reach out, begin to deal with it, because your waking up is the spark that lights it for somebody else. So I'm going to derail your train of thought there, but I thought that was important to bring up.
Yeah, and I think you did a really good job at sort of summarizing and crystallizing that, because that's exactly how I feel about this. You know, for me, there was many times when I was working through a lot of this that I wanted to contact you or talk to you about things. But I'm very much the kind of person that doesn't really like to talk about something until I figured it out to a certain extent. It's just my nature. I think that has damaged me and kept me in a paralysis for a long time. It's just who I am, though. But I think that, so what happened for me is, you know, I decided to just take a chance and start talking about it with a couple of people. And, before I did that, I had really started on working on eliminating destructive behaviors, like just all the things about myself that you really need to talk about it with other people. And I'm not saying this is what other people should do, but for myself, in my situation with my family and the life I live, I needed to pull myself together to a certain extent. So I did the best I could. It was hard. It was a little bit white knuckling it. But when I did that and I started talking about it, you know, I kind of thought that once I pulled myself together, I'd figure that these things that I had thought were really just irrationalities, that because I was being destructive, and that it wouldn't be a problem. But that is exactly what didn't happen. What happened was, the more I pulled myself together, the more it became silly to me that I ever thought anything else. And I started talking about it with a couple of people and was actually really surprised that I didn't get a negative response. And it gave me courage to more fully examine things with myself and to go deeper places with it. And, you know, that's one of the things that's really hard about this is there really is no proof. And that's why it's such a masterful idea of whoever's came up with this, because there really is no proof. But the proof is the more I talked about it, you know, I don't talk about it all the time with everybody. I have certain people I talk about it with. But the more I talked about it and the more I came into alignment with myself and the more I became less afraid to look deeper and deeper into it, the easier it was for me to pull my life together. And my life right now is more together than it has been probably any time ever, truthfully. There was times when I was a teenager and really successful that I appeared to be together, but inside I was not. And so the proof for me that it's my truth is the fact that as I've come into it, I've been able to pull myself together and enjoy life and engage with people in a way that I wasn't able to before. And it doesn't matter if I have all the details right or not. That isn't what this is about. For me, it's no longer even about figuring out if that's what was true for me. It's about figuring out, you know, it's about really understanding who and what I am and why I'm here and what I'm doing. And it's become not this horrible, painful thing anymore. It's become interesting, even though it's sometimes ugly what we look at. It's become interesting and enlightening and energizing, because all of these things that are being done to us are being done to us because something wants to keep us down. They're trying to bury us, but we're seeds, and you know, and we're going to grow if we're able to confront the reality about ourselves. And we, you know, some of us, probably all of us, have, you know, special gifts and magical powers, and I say that sort of jokingly, but sort of not, that they don't want to believe we have.
No, first off, I will say this. the projects that ran in the post-World War II period, and we've documented most of that pretty well because we've had the ability to talk to first generation so-called super soldiers, people like the late David Corso, our friend John Storm, and of course Duncan has been on. Duncan is considered Generation 2. The research that I kind of went down the road with had to do with the fact that I suspected there was something going on in the public domain tied to the education system when I swerved into Project Talent. Now, the public face of Project Talent, which anybody can search online to this day, there's a website out there that celebrates the glories of Project Talent, because Project Talent's cover was finding exceptional students.
Yeah.
But what it was really doing was it was finding exceptional people,
Yeah.
and then putting them systematically through the filtering, screening process to the point where they could find usable assets. I can't prove this, and again, I'm not going to try to, but the conversations that I've had and the people that I've talked to who were or felt they were a part of Project Talent-like projects probably numbers in hundreds of thousands over the course, I'll just say from the 1960s right up through the 1980s when formally Project Talent was supposedly retired, but it's never to this day been retired.
No, it exists under so many hundreds and probably thousands of sub-projects, and they're trying everything. They're into everything, you know. So you just said is exactly right for me. Like I went to a private school as a kid. Well, first I had a talent agent, which is pretty funny that they call it project agent. They call agents talent agent. I had a talent agent when I was younger, and that for Hollywood kind of stuff, and even for a few other kind of related things. But, and then I had at school, I was always gifted and getting special tests and being sent over here and there to try this and that. And some of the stuff seemed normal, but some of the stuff also seemed weird. And then gymnastics, like I'm just, to all the parents of gymnasts and very talented young athletes out there, it's great. I'm not saying people shouldn't do the sport they love and shouldn't be involved, but really pay attention to what is going on with the training with the child and why. Don't be a stage parent. Don't drive the coach nuts. Not that kind of thing, but just really understand and check in with your kid. Like monitor the behavior and the emotional state of your kid on a regular basis, because this kind of training is a perfect mechanism for hiding other kinds of agendas, other kinds of operations, things like that.
The pretext for, let's say, child time away from parents, especially as children get older and start to travel, opens doors for opportunities. And some parents are very welcoming of this. The ploys that they use, and I saw it in my own family, were to inform the parents that their children were exceptional. I mean, I think in my background, I was found to have a very high IQ. I don't like the numbers. I'm not going to talk about it. But I had skills that were kind of off the wall. And you're tested, and you're pulled out, and you're tested. And then you're tested in groups that no longer have anything to do with the school environment. And then there are suddenly these little trips that seem to not make a whole lot of sense in hindsight. And eventually what happens is you will start to bleed through. You will start to have flash memories.
Yeah.
You'll have experiences that I call sensory trigger points.
Yes.
Where just for a brief second, it can be anything. It could be a smell. It could be a glimmer of light in a room. It could be the texture of a wall. All of those things are triggering to memories.
Yeah.
And we're trained into our reality to ignore these things. We're trained to think that our lives are normal and that nothing could have happened. But, again, because we're talking to a very wide audience, I mean, many of you would have never experienced this, and I'm glad for that. But there are some of you out there who suspect that there are things that are off. This also goes, by the way, very much into the parallel situation that goes into ET abductions, ET contact experiences, which
Yeah.
interestingly enough seem to run parallel in many respects to military operations that we now know from research over the last decade are called mylabs, which seem to have been the military's attempt to synthesize the alien experience. And there's overlaps in all of this. So as much as we want to hold on to our normalcy and our sanity, when you reach the point where things are starting to fall apart, yes, you have to do exactly what Emily is talking about. You have to get centered. You have to get healthy. You have to do whatever you have to do to cope. But you also have to entertain the idea that underneath this storm somewhere, there's something there that wants to come out. Human psychology is basically, and I learned this going through therapy, and I learned it spending a lot of time on digging into psychology, that basically we are beings who have perpetual memories. We don't really get wiped. We don't really get erased. Things simply go into a storage container somewhere, and then at a really inconvenient time in your life, they erupt.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And actually, just what you were, I just want to add something to what you were saying about the mylabs and that alien abduction experience. And one of the things that's been constant for me throughout my life, and that has always been disturbing, but when I really started to examine what was really going on, this became one of the main points that I kind of stuck with, is that I'm a lifetime experiencer of sleep paralysis. And what's really interesting, like really, I've talked to other people who've had it, but no one on the level that I've experienced it. And it's really interesting, and I've noticed this throughout the years as I listened to people, read research, is that what I experienced with sleep paralysis sort of paralleled in a way what people call alien abduction or mylab. And, you know, there's also something remote about it for me. I never had the sensation that I was being abducted by aliens, or that I was in, you know, for me, the whole thing with the UFOs and aliens, I don't need to see them or have been abducted by them to know that they're there. I've had some certain kinds of experiences, but that wasn't so much related to my sleep paralysis. But what was interesting to me was just that something is happening that different people are experiencing different ways. And whether it's an organic experience, or whether it's a military type abduction, or whether there is a remote technology that is involved in this, because there is some very strange frequency things that come and go with it. You know, I think what's happening as we get into this thing, and this goes for almost everything we're going to talk about tonight, we get into this thing of where it's either this or that. And really, it's both of the things and other stuff too. You know, when I said they're trying everything and they're doing everything, that's right. And I think a lot of the basis for me and Randy's conversations and what our conversations will be going forward is this idea is that they're trying everything, so we have to talk about everything, and stop being bound by this idea that we have to stick to hard research. There's plenty of people out there who do that, and I admire them and I appreciate them because they've helped me with my level of understanding. But there has to be something else too, where we can go, what if, how about this, how about that? Because that's what they do when they're coming up with these programs, with these ideas, is they just throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. So we need to be able to have conversations in a way that no idea is off the table. And I think that's the only way we're ever going to be able to fully integrate this multidimensional experiences that experiencers have, but also just the everyday person who just finds this stuff interesting. They'll start to be able to recognize, wow, I'm more than just like a human being in a hard body. Like I have past lives and future lives and all these things that come into creating who I am right here and right now. And we need to stop being just bound to the idea of right here, right now.
It's interesting because I would say back in 2011, 2012, I interviewed Duncan and Finian's former partner, Miranda Kelly, right after she publicly came out and disclosed at Awake and Aware, Project Camelot. And in the course of what was originally, I think, a 4-hour conversation that we had, and that got pared down, obviously, to something more manageable. But I remember sitting there and blurting this, hearing this come out of my mouth and saying, we've all been part of a project. We've all been mind controlled. And we are all in a project, and we are all being mind controlled. And some of us aren't as easy to contain as others. We're sort of we're sort of the exceptions, the people that they really want to corral are actually the most difficult.
Yes.
That's why in the early days of MK Ultra, they were using traumatic mind control to split, because they understood that their subjects themselves were highly psychic, highly intuitive, highly intelligent people who were not going to submit. Therefore, they had to create all these altars in order to do their project. But it's a stunning reality, given how far down the rabbit hole I was at that point, to sit there listening to this incredible story from these people about their lives in the projects and leading these secret parallel lives, which their own relatives, their own families didn't believe them. Mm-hmm. And yet they could sit there and reel off the stories in detail, and they could pull corroboration in, and realizing this far down the line, there's something hidden in the background of a lot of our lives.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was actually something that I wanted to discuss was, this is not like, I think sometimes people are afraid to talk about this or to get into this information because they think it's just people who've been more directly involved with it that are talking about their experiences. I agree. Every person living on Earth right now, unless they live someplace that has never been at all integrated into, technology or culture at all, is affected by this. Because first of all, our governments have spent tax dollars doing these programs directly on people so they could then use things they learned on the masses through advertising, propaganda, all sorts of things. But also, there's also this thing where what you were discussing, there's like a couple of different kinds of people. So you have certain people in the public eye, like I would pick someone like Kim Kardashian, okay? Mm-hmm. Or even someone more in the alternative scope, like Alex Jones. I believe these people to be under a lot of heavy interference, a lot of control. And they're doing things with their behavior and the things they talk about that are then putting masses of people under like a slightly different kind of hypnosis, like a less direct hypnosis, but just as powerful. In fact, sometimes more powerful in some ways. And then there's other people, and I would consider maybe myself and yourself to be like this, people who had a lot of direct experiences, but yes, weren't easy to control and go along with things. And so it becomes the most interesting to them to experiment with stuff on us because they want to perfect their technology. And so you have to perfect your technology on the people that are hardest to control. And then you can use that perfected technology on either someone easier to control and it works magically, or on the masses and they just have no idea that it's even going on. And so there's no one listening to this show or anyone that you're related to that isn't in some way part of this project. There's all these names for all these different projects, but when it comes and all these different conspiracies and whatnot, but when it comes down to it, there's really just one. It's a conspiracy against the future, against letting us decide for ourselves
a conspiracy.
What our future will be.
That is exactly what it is, a conspiracy against the future.
Yeah.
Our friend James Martinez has talked about this.
Absolutely.
And, it's a stunning concept when you stop to think about it. In the 1960s and the 1970s, when I was growing up, we didn't have digital technology. We had television at that point. We had radio. We had telephones. We don't know what the military had at that point. And quite frankly, it goes far beyond what you could imagine. We'll touch on that either in this show or down the road a little bit. But they had already honed this to such a degree that in 1967, they were psychologically profiling every child in the schools. They knew who their families were. They knew everything that they needed to glean about each person passing through the, not just the public schools. When I say public, I should add that even your private schools were all a part of this, because they were all being brought in under the education department. And all of these, at that point, all of these programs were beginning to coalesce.
Yes.
Bringing in the psychologists. And I'm not against psychology. There is a legitimate aspect to psychology. But the psychologists, the sociologists, the psychiatrists, and the people who were basically doing the social programming, and they were applying these in statistically classifiable groups of people. That's why your classes were, at least in public schools, I don't know too much about private, your classes were sorted out in a very specific way. There was a demographic balance. There was a balance between people of different abilities. There was testing. There was blind testing. All of this was done under very severe scientific circumstances so that they could profile and begin to tighten up their regimen. The Nazis were doing this. They brought it in under Project Paperclip. And with the post-World War II middle-class economy being what it was, they were able to just expand this beyond anything. The end game to it really was to mind control the entire public.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, people who were inside projects or were part of sub-projects were really the guinea pigs for what was going to be done to all of us.
Yeah. Absolutely. And think, you know, back then they had to have sort of organized programs and testing to do this. Now all they have to do is give the student an iPad and just with a, you know, and watch what people do on Google and whatever. It's become, so everything has become remote and technological. So even removing any, that's part of what makes it even harder to recognize for people now. You know, they might say, well, I didn't go to any weird tests or classes or programs or whatever, because they don't have to do that anymore. All they have to do is send your kid home with an iPad for 2 weeks and they know everything they need to know about the kid. It's very scary. And I think parents should be really concerned about how much technology, obviously children need to learn about technology because that is the future. It needs to be done in a really specific and healthy kind of way, but not just everything done on the computer and people being able to, you know, school districts and corporations and Bill Gates and whatnot being able to have access to every keystroke your kid ever makes on the computer they have at school. That's very dangerous.
Yeah, and you know, at the same time, we are now in the era where everything is out in the open. You know, the fact that I've been doing these shows this long is me spilling my guts out onto the internet. In a way, it's kind of been, I've at times felt invaded by it, and I've at times come to the realization that there really isn't any privacy.
No, there's no privacy.
So the real challenge then, and this goes to the core of this whole experience of waking up, figuring out who you are, and then discovering the little dark corners of things that happened long ago, buried in the recesses, is we need to find a space for us that is that private, personal person.
Yeah.
And where I want to take you on this is where we're going to go, because we're going to take a break in a few minutes. But I want to kind of walk you into one of the things that we've talked about a lot has to do with cultural influences, and you have a very unique perspective as a result of the fact that you engage in a form of, I won't even call this entertainment, you do in terms of clubbing and music and the experiences that go along with that. Basically, this is a culture that's built around dance music and the experiences that occur in dance clubs, which goes into transcendental situations. And so, you know, again, one of the bulwarks against being invaded privately is to have a form of expression that's unique. And I can't stress this enough. Everybody in their own way is an artist. Everybody has something inside of them that wants to come out, whether you're a great athlete, you're a writer, you're a painter, you're a musician, you're a DJ, whatever you do, there's something there that wants to come out, but that thing lives inside of you in the one place that all of these mind control projects don't seem to be able to touch.
Yeah.
Creative spark of the human being, the genius of the human. And that's the part that balances all this darkness, is the creative soul of man can't be destroyed by these mind control games in this artificial world that they want to put us in.
So you want me to start with this now, or you want to talk about it when we come back, or?
Well, let's talk into it a little bit. We got a few minutes here, and then we'll kind of go there.
Okay, so one of the things that happened for me during a really tumultuous time when gymnastics was ending and I was just lost was I'd always liked sort of dancey kind of music, but I discovered techno music. So when we talk about dance music, which we'll talk about tonight and also probably on some future shows, I talk about the whole of dance music as electronic music, and I speak about the music that I particularly listen to as techno music or house music or techno and house music. So I'm just going to make that differential there for people. I started going to, at that time, raves in Los Angeles, and then when I moved to Austin, Texas. And it was something that like I had known about before and kind of resisted, and I got dragged there by a friend, and just within a very few times going, like this whole part of myself that I wasn't I didn't realize I could dance like that. I'm a dancer. I've been dancing in warehouses and fields and on Indian reservations all over this country for the last, 20 years. And it has been a way for me to explore my inner self and to try and make sense of and organize the outer world for myself. I started mostly as a break dancer. And so then it was more about at parties, I was like performing kind of a lot. And as time went on, I started doing that less and less and became more interested in what I would call emergent or introspective dancing. And a lot of times you will find me, the kind of events I go to now there really aren't raves anymore. There's huge festivals, which I don't go to. And then I go to what are termed in Los Angeles anyway, warehouse parties. They're very underground. And occasionally I'll go to an outdoor event that's like on an Indian reservation or some kind of special sacred kind of land generally. I'm very selective about the events that I go to, but generally when you find me dancing now, you will not find me spinning around on my back in a circle anymore. You'll find me off in a corner dancing a lot of times with my eyes closed. And I guess the kind of dancing you could say that I do is some sort of blend between popping and house dancing, my own sort of fusion on it. I don't know, I saw a video of myself doing it one time, and it looked sort of like I was building crop circles around myself. And that seems sort of right, because then maybe experiencing the energy field within that. But I started over time closing my eyes when I'm dancing. And, whether I've been to hundreds and thousands of parties and all different states of sobriety and non-sobriety and all different moods and whatnot. And so there's some crossover and some difference based on those kinds of states. But I discovered a landscape inside of myself on the back of my eyelids that was far more interesting than anything I was. And there's lots of weird stuff and interesting stuff.
Let's do this. Let's take the break on that note.
Okay.
And play a little music and we're going to throw up an image and we're going to play some music. It's all connected.
Okay.
Tell people what we're going to listen to and.
Okay, so we're going to listen to a track by a favorite DJ producer of mine. This is from a few years back, but it's a favorite. His name is Carrie Leckybush, and this track is called Ultra Terrestrial. It's from an album of his called You Are a Hybrid 2. It came out in 2012 on his Hybrid Productions. So enjoy and check it out.
Welcome back to the second half of OffPlanet TV. I'm Randy Moggins. This show streams live Wednesday nights across the planet from Conscious Consumer Network. ConsciousConsumerNetwork.tv is the web address where you can find the live streaming. We air live on YouTube. And do support free and independent media, the anti-media. We are the voice of the people, and we are taking that voice back. I'm Randy Moggins, and the website is offplanetradio.com. You can go there and find all the information. There's an archive of shows there for you to watch, and we just welcome you to this half because we're going to kind of go back into some interesting topics that I will just, this is a lot of ways, this is like kittens playing in a basket of yarn. There's all these shreds, these threads laying on the floor, and you just pick up a thread and you go, oh, look at that. That's really pretty. Let's play with that for a while. And that's what we do. But see, the threads are the threads of consciousness. And that's the most important thing that we can talk about because that's what differentiates you from the hive mind. And that's how we take back our power from the people who would turn us into drones. Emily, again, my guest is Emily Moyer. She's coming to us live from Los Angeles, California. And we're kind of talking about a lot of things, but we're really talking about one or two things. But the imagery that we got in that music at the break and the conversation leading up to it, the world behind your eyes, what happens when you immerse yourself in something like music. And this is music that's very technologically advanced. It has extraordinary layers to it. It has a beat and a drive that comes from the bass, from the subwoofers, that works on a very visceral level to put you into altered state. You were talking about the raves that happened, and I guess that culture probably goes back to the 90s. It's what evolved out of a number of different art forms. I grew up in the era of disco, which has an undeservedly bad reputation. There was wonderful music that came out of that era, and disco itself wasn't what the public saw, what was played on radio. I experienced it from underground discos that were going on in New York in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and it was a completely different culture. It was obviously a culture that had all of the things that go with a club culture, the sex, the drugs, the whole subgenre thing, because it was really about people who were coming out to themselves and engaging in a cultural system, so to speak. But this culture, the present dance culture, is very interesting to me. I experienced some of it when I was at Bonnaroo in 2007 and began to experience some of this new music and what was driving it. Tell us a little bit about the underground club culture and a little bit about your experiences and this experience. It's always hard to communicate an experience that's internal to an external world, but you do a great job of it. So let's drive this.
Okay, so right now, like what's going on with dance music is you have a couple different things. You have, obviously people have heard of Burning Man, and that's given birth to all of these sort of outdoor festivals, some of which are just very mainstream, and others are more interesting, involving art and speakers and even cuisine and different things, things like that. And along with those are really a commitment for a lot of people to a certain kind of lifestyle that a lot of people talk about, the 10 Commandments from Burning Man, or just this idea of sort of self-reliance and self-expression and a gift kind of economy where you're doing things because you want to, not to make money or charge money or whatever. Then there's also these like mainline festivals like your Electric Daisy Carnivals, Nocturnal Wonderlands, things like that are like carnivals with dance music. I have no interest in that whatsoever. But, a lot of people do. And I'd say that's, well, one thing we have to discuss, and we'll get into this, is that there is, as much as I love dance music and the stuff that goes along with it, there's also a large aspect of mind control that goes along with it. And those kinds of festivals are really, it happens in LA, it happens in the underground, and it happens at Burning Man too, but where it's like mass sent out, like the big festivals are like watching commercials during the Super Bowl, right? That's where like the mass kind of mind control goes out. But so there's that, which I'm not interested in. And then there's the underground, which are what we call underground parties, or in Los Angeles, we call them warehouse parties. Los Angeles has so I'm born and raised here, but I've been involved in dance music in other cities that I've lived in. Los Angeles has a really particular kind of culture that's hard to put a label on other than to call it LA warehouse scene. It's got a particular tone to the music, but also a certain kind of vibe that is a little, it's very creative and imaginative, but also a little bit dark, and lends to, some people are falling apart, but also some people really being able to find some interesting threads and some interesting things about themselves. And for me, I had lots of friends in the dance music scene in Austin, and I don't here. So when I go out to parties, it's more, I have a few, but I'm having a more internal experience. And so for me, what started to happen is initially it just was I was dancing, and it was almost like meditation. Like I was able to sort of work, like sort things out in my head that had been bothering me, or things that have been going on that I hadn't been able to sort of pin down or work out. And I think that sort of right-left rhythmic kind of thing helps you to get both sides of your brain online and able to integrate and use your conscious and your subconscious and your unconscious and your third eye and sort of work through it. So that was one stage. And then when I started closing my eyes, when I started dancing, I started to sort of, so the first thing that started really happening is I started sort of seeing, obviously like sort of beautiful colors and things, but sacred geometry. And I didn't really know what it was at that time. It was something I was seeing it, figure out what it was. Eyes, and it was interesting to me, but I started to sort of go further into that, and I like work with it, play with it, see how much of it that I could control, how much of it was something that was happening. And I ended up in some very interesting inner spaces, and I think that sometimes I ended up in, like me and Randy talk about it, almost like inside of a dark crystal or a black diamond or whatever you want to call it. And it was sort of like all this prism of colors around me and just sort of dancing around in there. So it was like my own inner disco. And I think partly from the colors that I was seeing, was I generating them with my own energy? Was it coming from the sound? It was kind of like, if you all know what Simatics are, if you've watched videos where they're playing frequencies and they have salt or sand on a plate and it organizes itself into a pattern. I was sort of seeing stuff like that, but very lit up. And I think part of what was happening was that the different color tones carry like a different kind of information in them, or a different kind of way of seeing things. And I started sort of what I would, I guess now term in retrospect, I started sort of remote viewing information and remote viewing myself, and also channeling. And the channeling would happen sort of with my eyes open or closed. It wasn't, and it was a different experience if I do it with my eyes open or closed. But I started getting a lot of information from, I don't know if we want to call it the universe, source. And of course, it's also occurred to me that, that some of this could be synthetic and being directed at me, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't engage in it. You just have to engage in it with that awareness. But I started getting a lot of information from the universe, just about different things. Sometimes I'd be like particularly down some rabbit hole with the conspiratorial information, and I would be like stuck on it, but couldn't sort of understand something about it. And I would get like a clue to it that would help me sort of understand stuff. Like one particular thing that happened to me one time, and I think I shared this story with you once, was I was at an Indian reservation and I was dancing, and this was about the time that Edward Snowden came out with the whole Edward Snowden thing was going down. And, my take on that was, what's really going on here? Yeah, he's, like, it's not how it's being presented. I always go probably to the farthest conspiratorial angle. That was my, and I was just sort of focusing it on from that. And what happened was, so it was just in my mind. But over the course of the evening, what was happening is I was getting information about the universe that was explaining to me what encryption really was, and that our DNA is an ancient encryption system, and it is the only one that is secure, and that is why they're trying so hard to break it with GMOs, with all this electric soup we live in, with the frequencies, with HARP and EMF and all this kind of stuff. And that what makes it secure is that even if they're able to break into it, what they get from it is going to be different than what we would get from it. So it's information that's intended only for you, and only you will really understand it. And I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. So that's kind of an example of information that would just come to me. But what started also happening was I started wanting to ask whatever I was sort of communicating with questions. And when I would ask it it would give me all sorts of interesting information. But whenever I would ask a question, I only ever got one answer. And the one answer I always got, and still to this day get, is, this is the sacred geometry of space, time, and sound. So when I started getting that, I was like, wow, that sounds like really cool and deep and weird. And I, on a certain level, I immediately understood what it meant. Started looking a little bit more into sacred geometry, and never could really find anything about sacred geometry of space or time or sound. And I thought, then maybe this was some kind of, I go back, and at this point I go back and forth between, is this some like deeply embedded knowledge in me? Because, I've had lots of, particularly when I'm dancing, I feel very much like an attachment to ancient Egypt and that kind of high technology and that kind of information. Is this some kind of sacred high information that I have embedded in me somewhere, and it's in my DNA, and that's why I was finding out that other information? I would go so many places with it. Or, and now sometimes I also think, is this just an artificial intelligence or mind control technology that was announcing itself to me because it's not used to having someone talk back to it? So I go to both places with it, but it doesn't matter. It's still interesting, and I've still learned a lot from it. And what I've come to know over time, I've been sitting with the sacred geometry of space, time, and sound thing for a couple of years now. And I really have started to understand, it's not in a way that it's very easy to explain, but, it's basically what we are experiencing is some sort of, fusion of frequency and time dimension and space dimension, and sound alters that. And I think sound has a lot more to do with the reality that we're experiencing than people realize. Okay. I think how I actually at this point believe that what it's trying to explain to me, whatever it is that tones and sound hold sort of reality together almost in like a geometric kind of crystal.
Yeah, they're frequencies. They function, sound as light as sound. This goes back to the 60s when you began getting light shows at the psychedelic events, which, the psychedelic culture kind of overlaps the dance culture in a lot of ways. Because in all of these cultures, there's genre and subgenre. There's all of these different patterns that cycle through. So even with dub artists and rave music, there's a psychedelic aspect to all of this.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
Color, sound, motion, the subharmonic frequencies, these are very ancient forms of expressions. These go back to the Dionysian cultures.
Yeah, absolutely.
We saw that resurgence begin in the 60s along with the tribal aspects of it. What was Woodstock? It was a tribal gathering. It was promoted that way.
So go ahead, sorry.
But what I was going to say is, you can speculate, was that, quote, them putting this event together?
Right.
CIA seating LSD
of course it was.
out. Of course it was. Which
right.
kind of brings us into this conversation that you and I have had recently about are we going to be purists? Are we going to reject the whole machine? Do we turn off the technology? Do we not dance? Do we not go to clubs?
No.
It is about reclaiming all of this.
Yeah. You know, dancing and musical expression, especially rhythmic dancing, which techno music and house music definitely is ancient. You know, one of the things that happened for me when I started seeing all this really beautiful, amazing light shows on the back of my eyes that were far better than anything I was seeing against the wall at parties. And I've seen some pretty exotic, there's some pretty amazing, you know, visual artists out there. You know, Scott Pagano, CPU, these are guys who you can go to and look at their websites, and they have amazing visual shows. But if I could show people what I'm experiencing on the back of my eyelids, it's incredible. And I started wondering where this was coming from. And it's funny because, like I told you, I have all these feelings like connected to Egypt. I'll share one story, for example. One night I was dancing at a party, and I had my eyes closed, and I had and I've seen this before since, but it was basically like, there was a flower of life with sort of a Metatron's cube superimposed over it. And what it was showing me, off far in the distance, it was showing me the pyramids of Egypt. And then it was showing me sort of a spinning disc, which I now could call the energy formation disc. But it was showing me this sort of spinning disc that used to be on the cover of your show that was sort of on like a pulley cord, and it was moving up and down along these angles that would be like, I guess sort of like a 9 and 3, 9 and 6, or 9. I don't know what if you're doing a 3, 6, 9 kind of thing. It was like this kind of angle, and the disc is going up and down, and it's being controlled by sound. And I just took that to mean that it was showing me that how they built the pyramids of Egypt was they were levitating stones with sound, so that they would kind of send it up on this thing that was sort of creating energy and pushing it up. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know.
Actually, there is a school of thought out there now that the 3, 6, and the 9 are the keys to all of this.
Yeah, yes.
We talk about the golden ratio and all of these things, but the 3, 6, 9 is the golden cube.
They were the numbers that Tesla was obsessed with. And I have a lot of interesting kind of Tesla information come to me sometimes when I'm dancing. But this thing was interesting. And I could see the way it was happening. And of course, I'm dancing with my eyes closed because I'm watching this interesting show. And different colors are lighting up on certain spots in it. And it usually corresponds to, in the room where I'm dancing, there being people that I like or don't like. But what happened was there was a pink light. And I opened my eyes, and this guy was standing right in front of me. He was like, "Hi." He's like, "I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you're doing, but I like watching you do it. I've been watching you for hours. What are you doing?" My name's, I can't remember what he said his name was, so-and-so. I'm from Egypt. And I was just like, wow, man, that's pretty cool. Like, there's just no way they can be completely controlling and manipulating that. You know what I mean? Maybe they can. I don't know. But whatever it is, there's so much information. And, then I actually, that started me on this thing where, like, whatever I would see on the back of my eyes, I would go look for sort of information about it. And then I just started going, I want to see that again. What I saw on the back of my eyes, I want to see something that looks like that again. And I started looking for art on the internet. And I particularly found our website called Deviant Art. And I would
I've talked about Deviant Art.
I would be able to find things on there that looked very similar, in some cases almost exactly like what I had seen. And one of the really interesting things was, oftentimes I would find a piece of art that had been posted during the time that I was at the party. So I'm seeing something on my eyelids. I'm going home and I'm finding it on my computer, having been posted there during the hours I'm gone. And I started thinking, well, what the fuck is this? Excuse my language. What the hell is this? Is it that I'm putting this energy out there, and there's some, we're having like some sort of like mind melt and they're creating it, or are they creating it and I'm remote viewing it and picking it up and seeing it? Or, is my brain connected to the internet? And all of these, or some combination of the three, which is probably more what it is. But I became fascinated with this, and still am. I don't have as much free time to spend doing this. But to me, it told me that, like, one of the things I've learned from this is that all of this technology is created based on us. It's a poor replication of what we can do with our own minds. If it's possible that either I'm picking up something someone's creating, or I'm sending it out and they're picking up and creating it, that's incredible. and and there's so much inner knowledge I've gained from this experience that I have with music and dancing, and just sort of like watching what unfolds. It's like it's on my inner universe instead of looking out here. It started, you know what it is? It really got me to that spot. I've always loved the thing you say at the end of your show, the truth is out there, it's inside of you. What I've come to discover is information is out there, answers are only inside of you. And I think so, especially during this time, the last year or so, where I've gone through a major transformation, where I started talking about some things and really putting my life together. For me, it's become more like a place to remote view information in my inner self, and to like kind of, explore the universe inside. People are so obsessed with what's out there in space and this, that, and the other thing. We spend so much time focusing on that as a culture, and most people haven't even explored the universe that's inside of themselves. And I've found that the universe inside of yourself has
far more vast. It's far more vast.
And it has all the clues that you need to understand well enough the universe outside of yourself.
This goes into an entire school of, I don't know whether you would call it theological so much as philosophical. The concept that you are the universe, that you are the microcosm of the universe and the creation of reality. And, your experiences as an extension of the technology. There's a story that was, and I forget where I saw this. You know who Ingo Swann is?
Yes.
He was a very famous psychic. He was actually the original remote viewer. He was at Stanford Research Institute. This was probably about 1970. And Hal Puthoff started a random number generator machine inside the lab at SRI. They brought Ingo in because they wanted to see if Ingo could synchronize with the machine. Ingo apparently went inside of the machine and started messing with it. Instead of the machine feeding Ingo started feeding the machine. In other words, he reversed the entire experiment, because this was all at that time about developing this for the CIA at Stanford. Right. So Ingo, clever man that he was, literally went inside the machine, remote viewed it, sussed it out, and then began running the machine from his mind, which completely, again, F's with their whole reality stream.
So it's amazing you say that, because one of the things I was thinking about today when getting ready to do this was, we talked about last time how a lot of FM synthesis and dance music and electronic music also comes from SRI, Stanford Research Institute.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, so when I was just saying a few minutes ago how could it be that these days, all this experiences I'm having is a artificial intelligence or a mind control technology that's being applied? And there's certain other interesting things about the Los Angeles.
I wish I had pulled this article. I have it, and it's not accessible right now. But for the viewers and the listeners, you can go out and you can Google search Stanford Research Artificial Intelligence and CCRMA, which is Karma, which was the laboratory that was founded by a scientist who developed FM synthesis, which was the technology that became what you would famously know as the Yamaha DX7 synthesizers, which were all over everything in the 90s. That was the synth sound that you heard in pop and dance records. And what happened there was they literally merged the arts wing of Stanford with the CIA wing, which was working on artificial intelligence. So right from the beginning in the 1970s, because of what Stanford was doing at that time, they basically merged artificial intelligence with the development of electronic music.
Right. Yeah. So,
and I'll try and put some notes up to document this on this show too.
Yeah, guys, check the description box. There'll be lots of cool stuff in the description box.
Yeah, look down below.
Yeah. So, it's occurred to me some of the things that I remote view when I'm dancing are that these things I'm experiencing could be experiences that are being created for me that aren't necessarily coming from within myself. But I think that just like Ingo Swann went into the machine and started changing things, my consciousness and awareness of what's going on has helped me to sort of not fix it or change it, but be able to use the, I think sometimes I fool them if that's what's going on, but also there's something powerful about that. And I found ways to use it to do things that are helpful to myself and that are interesting. But, it's dawned on me. So we can go sort of right there. One of the people who has had a really tremendous effect on how I feel about music is Dave McGowan. Late Dave McGowan, rest in peace. I'm sorry I never got to meet you or speak to you.
Laurel Canyon.
Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. And when I read, I actually haven't read the book. I read the series of articles he had up a couple years
ago. On his website.
On his website. And his research on that and other things is absolutely amazing. I really think that he's going to eventually go down as one of the great researchers of our time that help us uncover reality. And he's a very down-to-earth kind of guy. He's not super conspiratorial. He just stumbled upon this stuff. But when I read that and I started thinking about my experiences in dance music, and it's sad when you listen to him. One of the things he talks about is how hard it was for him because he loved that music from the 60s and 70s, how hard it was for him to accept it and then still learn to enjoy the music. And I kind of, was going through the same thing with mine. I know that there's a lot of unhealthy, crazy things going on with dance music. Like I went, when I was back in Austin recently visiting, I with a friend attended an event that she was DJing at that was really disturbing to me. And it was disturbing because the dance music that is very popular amongst particularly younger group of kids now is extremely discordant, not harmonious. It feels like a Tourette syndrome, or like it feels just so twitchy. They even call some of these genres of music twitch, glitch, trap. It's telling you what it is.
I actually like glitch music, by the way.
It's good. Some of it, but there is some of this music called trap, and there's so much. Yeah. There's so many different. I felt like when you see those videos of like when they were doing the mind control experience where they would like put the helmet on people and have like all these crazy sounds and visions. That's what it felt like in the room. And it was just like, and these kids were just standing there taking it and they didn't seem to be bothered by it. And that was what's so disturbing about it to me.
Sounds like going to see the Ramones at the Mud Club in 1977.
Right.
Slam dancing. Culture goes off in tangents.
But at least they weren't like engaged in it. You felt like it was like something, this was just like kids were like witnessing some like disturbing pattern in front. It was very weird. And, so I think that sort of what's happening with dance music is that they're looking at stuff in really underground places, okay? And like I think that probably they're watching what goes on at the kind of events that I go to. And maybe they're observing people like me and how I respond to the music.
Yeah, again, the test lab aspect.
The test lab. And then they are, and I think they're doing that at Burning Man too in a little different way because that's that's an outdoor event with lots of people and like is much more like a much more hedonistic kind of situation. There's a lot more factors going on there, but I think they're observing there and then they're distributing at mass at these other kinds of more mainstream festivals. And I think that for me, I think one of the things that has helped me to be protected and not come under like some of this kind of control is the fact that I just by nature am interested in figuring things out and researching things, and anything I observe, I'm going to look into it. Most people are not like that. So they're just having all this stimulus presented to them. And maybe they're seeing some of this really fascinating stuff that I'm seeing, but they have no like point of reference to understand it. And so it's just like, it's like all the stimulation happening to them. And it's like overloading their sensory perception to the point where they're just like almost brain dead, and there's something weird going on. And I wish more than anything I could have a conversation with Dave McGowan about this. But there's definitely, especially with electronic music, all music is frequency based. But because in electronic music, you're not dealing with a song that has a lot of words and has like a certain kind of like melody to it, you're dealing just with layers and layers of beats and frequencies and rhythms. Like there's a lot of stuff that can go on there. And I know when I go into an environment, I'm very selective about the music I listen to and the events that I go to. But sometimes I find myself in a space where the music is very discordant and and there's like a lot of weird dark energy. and it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't stay there, but some nights I feel like I'm doing spiritual warfare when I'm there. Like I literally have spent evenings balancing the energy in the rooms that I'm in by the way that I'm moving and the energy that I'm putting out. And other times there's some, and it has not only to do with the DJ and the music that's being played, but the space it's being in, the space it's in, the geometry of the room, but also in Los Angeles, and this is another conversation as well, but we're dealing with a vast scenario of things that go on underneath the ground in Los Angeles. And I think that plays into some of it as well. So it's, I have experiences ranging from totally harmonious to like and peaceful to like, this is fucking crazy. And sometimes I have to leave, but other times I stay and just, try and see, can I balance this? And that's something we need to practice too, because some of us with these gifts to be able to do this stuff, these kinds of environments, I guess what I want to say is the dance music environment and whatever you're into, whether it's video games or sports or different kinds of things, they're beautiful places to explore and experience and have good times, but they're also battlefields for our minds. And it's a place for us to learn about ourselves, learn about our opponents, and hone and sharpen our skills and figure out how to make sense of things in a discordant space. So we need to enter these things with awareness and consciousness and research the thing and look into some of these things we're engaging in. And also develop a practice that I do before I go almost anywhere now, but certainly into those kinds of spaces, of building like a sort of armor around yourself, protection around yourself. Yep. And then when you come home, especially from a musical event, because there's a lot of people who are practicing a lot of different kinds of arts and magics, and not all of them are bad, you know what I mean? But it might be something different than what you like or what you believe. And it's going on all around you in those kinds of spaces, especially dark spaces at night. And so when you come home, you need to have some kind, I clean myself. And I don't mean I take a shower. I take a shower too. But I clean myself, and I sort of the next day almost do a debriefing with myself of like, what's kind of entered my head space and my body space, and what of it comes from me, what of it comes from somewhere else, and what stuff do I want to keep and what stuff needs to go. And I think you need to, just like I said earlier, that parents need to check in with their kids, people need to learn to check in with themselves, especially after having exhilarating experiences, because, don't mistake yourself. I was listening to a great show on Conscious Consumer Network this week, Unspun, with Jan Irvin and Joe Atwell, and they had on a guy named Steve Outram talking about Burning Man. And these people who want to control and socially engineer things, they want you to have a transformative experience, as long as it's one that they can control and that has an outcome they like. But they know the power of this music to create a transformative experience. So make sure you're creating the transformative experience that you want. Make sure you're in control of your transformative experience, or, and monitor it and watch it. And don't let this thing that you think is like a great fun thing turn out to be something that just hits you over the head with something you had no idea what it was. So be really conscious and aware, and take care of yourself and your friends in those environments. Because, we need music. We need dancing. I would not have survived the rough years of my life where I couldn't figure out what was going on with myself without it. But I'm also very lucky to not have lost myself in it. And so this is words of encouragement and words of caution for people to engage in your art with lots of passion, and to just be really careful about, how you take care of yourself in dealing with that.
Yeah, I don't see the answer as to go dig a hole and crawl in it and become a hermit. Look, we're social creatures. We're part of swimming in this reservoir of other souls. The goal here is to engage the culture, whatever the culture is.
Yeah.
And then to allow ourselves to sift through this culture and take what's useful from it and discard it. I really appreciated that you kind of put that in there, the idea of building the protection, and that's something that maybe someday you and I can do a whole show on, because there's a whole energetic process. Yes. And it varies greatly according to your disciplines, your own individual practices, but, using things like breath, using things like building light energy around you as a filter. And then the awareness that many people don't realize, and this is something that I actually learned this from my father, but the idea of being aware of what's around you while still engaging. You know, we really have a mind that's capable of going off and doing what we call multitasking when we're doing it on a computer. You know, there's a background mind process that runs. I notice myself doing it anytime I'm in a public situation because I'm hypervigilant.
Me too.
And that's, you know,
one of my skills.
well, it's not only a skill, but that's actually an offset of some form of trauma as well.
Absolutely.
But it's actually a good thing if you know how to control the process, which is basically putting those tentacles out there so that you're aware of what's going on around you while not at the same time being preoccupied with it. It's foreground process of engaging what's going on around you. And the background process is basically, it's got these probes out there. And it's basically being very attentive to what's moving, what kind of energies are shifting, sense of danger, you know, all of the emotions run through that, everything. I mean, I've walked into rooms and I felt like hypersexuality. I've walked into rooms and felt paranoia. Yeah. All of these emotions are real. The culture would lock us down with that. Yes. The culture, and especially the culture that wants to feed us big pharma drugs, will lock that down in you because the pharma drugs basically make you a dead zone emotionally. You flatten your responses out. Yeah. The thing here is to engage your emotions at such a level that you're aware of what's going on and you have like a pulse. Your body, especially when you take care of it with your nutrition and the kind of water you drink is very important, and you know the supplements that you take and just the different things you do to take care of it. Your body can act as like a radar or a sensor, and you can modulate things with it. You can use it to sense, you know, like it's like your body is the ultimate dowsing rod. You know what I like, and so you can with concentration on this, you can learn to enjoy yourself and be fully engaged in the experience you're having while monitoring the subtle changes in your body. Monitoring, like, you know, sometimes you get hot. Like with me, sometimes like when something weird's going on, I get like real hot all of a sudden or real cold all of a sudden, you know, or you suddenly feel like, my jaw wants to clench. Or sometimes, you know, like you obviously know the hair's standing up, but there's little subtle, sometimes they're really super subtle, but I know now when those things happen, okay, that what to look for, you know, and you can, the other thing is to sometimes being hypervigilant can be bad. You don't want to react immediately. You know, when you feel like a stimulus like that, it's like you got to be like, okay, and just kind of sort of like nonchalantly check out your surroundings. And sometimes it's just like, all right, you know, it's better to not have like that fight or flight like kind of response. You know, if you feel it in your body, but sometimes immediately reacting to something can be more dangerous than sort of, okay, step back a second, chill, observe your surrounding, and then decide what your exit point's going to be or your engagement point. Sometimes it's proper to engage in something. You know, like I was discussing a few minutes ago, like sometimes I have to leave the party that I'm at because that energy field and whatever's going on there is not working for me. Other times I feel like, okay, this is weird, but like this is a place for me to work on it and also to heal the space a little bit. You know, so deciding, you know, but not reacting this moment, actually right now. Well, every time that you go through that, and I've gone through that, I've been in situations where I did flee. I've been in situations where I guess what you would call agoraphobia even kicks in. You know? I used to experience, I don't get it much anymore, what I used to call a tunneling effect. I would walk into a crowd and everything would begin to just move around me. Yeah. It felt like I was in a tube. Yeah. That was just an aspect of the hypervigilance and certain triggers that were going on. And in a crowd of people, it's very hard to filter all those triggers. But in the course of mastering all this, part of it was learning to manage breath, of being able to take control of the whole system. I mean, we know that we have many bodies, that we basically, we have an etheric body, a light body. We're throwing all of that out there. And the more control that we attain over time in terms of mastering the bodies, however many, as our friend Bob Dobbs used to say, the 5-body thing, and then Ion would say, well, there was 9 bodies. We don't really know how many bodies we have, but we kind of,
like 12.
yeah, we're aware that we're more than one being, which is a whole other thing that we're not going to pursue tonight. But the point of it all is that the experiences that you've had doing the underground clubs and the dance music is all part of basically this gigantic antenna system.
Yes.
And then this inner space that's almost like you're dancing in the dark one minute and then the mandala opens up.
Yes. It's kind of like, it's kind of like when you look at like a prism or a crystal and it's all lit up, finding yourself sort of inside of that. And then it's like almost like Alice in a looking glass, and you can look into the pink light or the blue light and you get kind of like a different perspective on that. And just like that can be manipulated on you, you can use that to your advantage, to look out with, to introspect with. And, but the awareness is key. It's that, but it's that whole idea of sort of the like we've been talking about today, the dark crystal, you know what I mean? And what's inside of there, and what is that? Why is that symbol so present in lots of things? And why is that's at the, I think that's at the core of our planet, and even at the core of what's inside of our head.
Because even in the dark crystal, there's light.
Absolutely.
You're perceiving something that's so dark, it is actually internalizing and then externalizing its own facets outward.
Yes.
And possessing, because darkness is basically the occurrence of all colors at once, whereas white, it depends on what color system you're working with. As an artist, you come to learn additive and subtractive systems. But theoretically in light, that's the presence of all colors at once.
I call it prism technology.
Yeah, well, and it is. It's when you first showed me the album cover to the song that we played this hour. The song again was, tell people what that was.
Well, so this art that you'll see is from an album from 2012 by Carrie Leckie-Bush called "You Are a Hybrid Too," and there is a track on that. It's that. Actually, we were going to listen to a different track on the way out. Maybe we'll listen to Black Diamond on the way out. We're going to listen to a different one. Let's listen to Black Diamond on the way out.
Okay.
And then we're going to attach in the description box a link to a recent DJ mix by Carrie Leckie-Bush that has a lot of tracks from that album on it, as well as other stuff. He's one of my favorite DJs. The first time I ever heard him, I was like, oh my God, this is the soundtrack I've been hearing in my head my whole life. He's really interesting. Maybe one day, it would be super cool if one day we got to talk to him. His music is phenomenal.
See, that's the thing about it, is in this culture, and I noticed this with some of the music that I listen to that's very alternative, these people are actually communicating a lot of the same ideas that you and I have talked about, that I've talked about on this show for years, because the culture out there is being affected by this as well. The concepts that we're dealing with are the things that get exposed artistically. And the beautiful thing about it is, there's this whole superficial pop culture that's perceived as dance music, but there's something in the underground, because the underground is always the most interesting place to be. The underground actually is pushing out pushing away from the mainstream. It's pushing out these vibrations, these ideas that need to go out into the culture. It's a transmitter.
It's absolutely. And of course, that's what makes it so important that they capture it to a certain extent, but they can't. And so all they can do is study it. And you know, but it's so funny. If you go and look at the track titles from a lot of particularly techno artists, if you look at the track titles, any of these could be the names of topics that Randy has discussed on any one of his shows, or the titles of books of any of the people that you've had on. So there's something about, and you know, people, especially in tribalist, in indigenous cultures in Africa and South America, you know, places who do like rhythmic dancing to drum beat, they can tell you that you know, they'll do it for hours and hours. They will do it. They have, you know, events where they have, like, you know, holidays or ceremonies where they dance for days and days on end. And I can tell you this: I've had the experience of dancing for close to 24 hours straight. And there are levels of reality that you go through and get to that are.
That fucking kill me.
There was a party I went to one time it was like a 24-hour party. And I'd say at about hour 12 or 13, I had this moment where I couldn't tell. And it was funny because I looked at the DJ at this moment and I could tell he was thinking the same thing as I was. I could no longer tell if the music was making me dance or if my dancing was making him make that music. You know what I mean? And that, you know, that's amazing. You know what I mean? Like that's, you know, that's really cool. And I think that
actually goes right back into Heisenberg's uncertainty principle right there. You know, the whole cause and effect thing. We've kind of wrapped a lot of topics around this show tonight, and we're going to play a piece of music going out and give some space for this. For Emily and I, this was kind of an opportunity to sit down and share our conversations, our some of the ideas we've been bouncing out, because what we're really trying to do is we're going to push the media again. We are the anti-media. We're going to push the envelope. So this show tonight was kind of our putting our feet into the stream and then seeing where the stream takes us. We'll see if we can actually swim up water doing that. Somewhere in there was a mixed metaphor. I'm not going to go there. Emily Moyer, thanks for coming on for this edition of OffPlanet TV and OffPlanet Radio. And you and I are going to have a lot of conversations in the future. Anything you want to close out saying tonight? And don't forget to mention the song we're going to play.
Okay. So just, me and Randy are going to be doing a series of shows going forward in the future. I'm super excited about them. I don't have a blog or anything right now. I hope to have something in the future. I'm open for interesting, respectful dialogue and conversation with people. You can contact me on Facebook if you're interested in that. And we'll just see where this goes. We're going to have some strange conversations and see if we can push through to another level of understanding ourselves and each other.
Absolutely.
We're going to have conversations about some things that have already been talked about and some totally new things, but we're going to have them in a different way.
Yeah.
So I look forward to it. So on the way out, here we go. And this will be Carrie Lucky Bush with Black Diamond, and check out his DJ mix down below.
And we'll see you. We are out. Good night.